Since all forms of human activity produces waste, what matters is how you manage that waste. How do you control how much waste we produce as a society? And once we produce that waste, how are you going to manage it? So this refers to the various schemes to manage and dispose of wastes. And there are different methods on how we have waste management, and it can be done in the individual, community, and nationwide level. So the prime objective of waste management is to reduce the amount of unusable materials. So reduce the amount of waste. If we want to be kinder to our environment, reduce the amounts of wastes. Then if you do have waste, if you cannot avoid waste entirely, you avoid causing environmental impacts or health hazards to the different communities. So there are different ways on how you could process or manage your waste. So we have already mentioned the first one, which is the most important one, is to reduce the wastes. Next, you could also isolate the waste that we produce into landfills. Ideally, there shouldn't be any person living in our landfills. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the Philippines. Recycling, so instead of dumping the waste in landfills, you could reduce the amount of landfills or trash that you will dump in your landfills by taking some of the usable materials into recycling. You could also incinerate it, which poses its own health hazards, because when we say incinerate, you're going to burn the trash, and as you know, that's not actually legal. That's not legal in the Philippines, and it's dangerous. It poses health hazards. Next, composting. So if you have biodegradable wastes, instead of throwing it directly into our normal trash, you're going to, instead of throwing it into your normal trash, you will bury it underneath the soil and let nature take its course. Then you also have sewage treatment. Like, remember the issue in Boracay? There should be proper sewage treatment in different commercial or industrial establishment. Even the wastewater that are from our homes should be processed first if we will divert it back into natural bodies of water. So there should be different levels of treatments or filtering that will happen to avoid toxic chemicals and solid waste being dumped into our bodies of water. So that's the idea of waste management. Okay, reality check. How bad is humanity's waste? I think you know that it's bad, but let's look at the data. Let's look how bad is bad. Okay, so this is our global waste composition data in the year 2016. So the graph on the left of the screen is showing you what is the waste composition of what we produce. And just to summarize, in the year 2016, we produced 2.01 billion tons of waste in 1 year as a collective. 2.0 billion tons of waste. And if you think that's a lot, we are expecting that it will increase in the next 30 years. So as countries are developing further and more, there are basically more people on Earth, then there will be more waste generated. So that 2.01 billion tons will be increasing as we look annually. Okay, so let's look. What is exactly our waste? So you can see here, since we have a lot of food needs, 44% is food in our agricultural in nature. Then we also have paper and cardboard occupying the 17%, plastic occupying 12%, and various material occupying 14%. It's large because it's other. Other compositions include glass, metal, rubber, wood, leather. So industrial in nature. But majority would be our food needs, agricultural wastes, paper, cardboard products, and plastic. So that's our major contributors of wastes. And the food and greens are understandable because we have needs, like they're biodegradable. Paper and cardboard are biodegradable. The problem comes with plastic because it's produced in bulk and it does not biodegrade readily. You need like 100 years in order to degrade one plastic bottle. So in 2016, the world generated 242 million tons of plastic. So that 242 million tons of plastic will take 100 years to biodegrade, and it's gonna take it just 1 year, and next year we produce more and more and more, and basically we are turning our world into a plastic world, and we ourselves are turning into plastic. More on that later. Okay, so why are we producing so much plastic waste? Because it's cheap. As you can see here, our world trend as from the 1950s to the 2015, we have steadily increasing the production of plastic in the world. So their polymer resin and fiber production. So different types of plastic are being produced in metric tons per year. We have become very dependent on plastic itself. So what happens to the plastic that we produce? Well, sadly, only 20% is recycled. Around 20% is burned, and that's dangerous. Please don't burn plastic because that produces carbon emissions. And the rest are dumped, discarded. So 50%, more than 50% of the million tons of plastic that we produce end up in landfills, rivers, and oceans and other parts of the natural environment. Okay, and as you can see, these are the different industries which uses or produces plastic. And by far, we produce a lot of plastic just because of packaging. If you go to your kitchen and look at the different grocery items, or you like walk into a grocery, every bit of product is almost wrapped in plastic. You have your canned products, but they are small percentage. All products are wrapped in plastic, and that's why our packaging industry, or the industrial sector, produces the most amount of plastic. There are other contributors as well, like construction, textiles, but still 146 million tons in just 1 year is from packaging. And the sad part is, since this is packaging, most likely it's only a single use plastic. So after you eat your snack or your pancit canton, it's going to be trashed. Yeah, single use plastic. Okay, so let's look at the data in the Philippine setting. So unfortunately, again, the most recent data I got is from 2016. But still it's very telling. We can predict, or we can assume that it's going to be the same data or the same trend anyway from our present day. So the greatest contributor the greatest contributor, of course, is NCR here with 9,000 tons per day. Like, just input that in your mind. 9,000 tons per day of trash, followed by, of course, us. So when population, if there is a large amount of population or a large population, trash follows. So we have NCR and Region 4A as the highest contributors of waste generation per day. And then, as you can see, it has been increasing. So as our way of life is developing and more people are being added, or our population is increasing, then yeah, waste generation is increasing. So in 2016, there's 40,000 tons per day, and we can assume that it has already increased by the year 2020, especially in the face of COVID-19. Face masks cannot be recycled and must be discarded right away. So we are already facing waste problems as a country. Okay, aside from that, this is a fact that is super cringy, because plastic in our oceans is becoming a major problem. Like, plastics are killing our marine life. And we have already identified the reason why are the plastics being dumped into the oceans. And most of the plastic that are ending up in our oceans are dumped by coastal countries and from river systems. So people live nearby rivers, and since the river is there, they just dump their trash into the river. But the river trash or the plastic in the rivers ultimately leads to the ocean. So we already know which are the culprits. So top 20 rivers which contribute to the plastic in our oceans. And Pasig, Pasig is here. Philippines is one of the major contributors of plastics in our world. So China produces a lot of plastic as well, but not be racist, we also are contributing. So in year 2015, we had almost 39 tons of plastic dumped in our ocean, and that's just from the Pasig River. How about the other parts? So it's pretty unsettling news. We are trapped in what we call a sachet economy. The problem with the Philippines is that we're poor. Since our country is poor, we cannot afford products that are in bottles or in large boxes. Thus, the trend of a sachet economy. So since we are poor and we cannot afford large products, we just buy them in small sachets. And in the Philippines, around 164 million single-use sachets are used every day. So imagine 164 million single-use sachets, and then that's just one use. We'll produce more. So 164 million the next day and the next day. So no wonder that we are producing or dumping a lot of plastic in our oceans. So we have sachet conditioner, sachet cheese, sachet shampoo, sachet ketchup. Pretty much everything is in a sachet nowadays. And that's actually bad. It means our country, our citizens cannot afford normal sized products. We can only afford the small ones. Thus, since we are trapped in a sachet economy, there are organizations that has labeled as the third largest contributor to the plastic pollution. So even if Philippines is not producing that much of a trash per day, we are bad at waste management. I mean, in comparison to the other countries, we produce less waste. Like United States, Australia beat us a lot in terms of waste they are producing per day. But we are bad at managing our own wastes. So there, we are destroying our environment. And here comes the problems. And all of these problems have pretty much been observed in national level. So we have landslides of waste dumps like what happened in Payatas. If you are curious about the tragedy, you could Google it. Like, people have been buried underneath mountains of trash. Contamination of our water resources. So like Manila Bay and Pasig River, there used to be clean water sources, but not anymore. Clogging of drains, and which causes flooding, which is often happening in our cities. Transmission of diseases like the leptospirosis outbreak that happened in Manila, yes, in NCR. Respiratory diseases due to waste incineration. So rubber, plastic being incinerated. So it's bad for your health, and also it produces carbon emissions. Due to that, increasing amount of trash, there is also loss of biodiversity. So fishes, coral reefs are being harmed, birds. We also have decline in tourism because there's too much trash and nobody wants to see that. Contribution in global emissions, as mentioned, and also threat to food sources. So since our soil and water resources are contaminated, then our food sources as well are contaminated. I think this is also one of the problems that has been caused by our waste mismanagement. So Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is like a large bulk. If you haven't heard of this, you could like search a YouTube video about it. There is a large patch of plastic, several patches of plastic just floating around in the ocean, and it's made up of 99% plastic. Just plastic drifting in our oceans. And it's composed of 80,000 tons of garbage. And nobody is going to take responsibility since it's floating in a neutral area like international waters. No one is volunteering to clean it up because it's gonna take a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money in order to clean our garbage patches. And no one's doing it. Like, no one's cleaning the Great Pacific garbage patch. Then, aside from that, since we have a lot of plastic in our oceans, there comes the problem of microplastic. I have mentioned that plastic does not degrade easily, but they could break down into smaller pieces. And here comes the danger. So, since they are less than 5 millimeters in diameter, marine creatures die of it. So there are fishes that are filter feeders. So whales are filter feeders. So they consume a lot of microplastic pollution, and a lot more is being generated annually. It's very difficult to clean because it's very small. And if you have eaten marine like fishes, seafoods, most likely you already have microplastic in your body. And that's what I mentioned earlier when I said that we are basically turning into plastic because we are eating microplastic. There are several products that has already been seen with microplastic. So salt, there are some salts with microplastic since they are from the ocean. So seafood has microplastic. There are honeybees, like honey jars with microplastic. I don't know how this ended up there, but several of our products are already contaminated with microplastic. So in the long term, we may be encountering health concerns caused by microplastic. Okay, so since our situation as a country, as a world is so bad, what can we do? So first, we should invest in better holistic solid management systems. So when it comes to, for example, the Philippines, since we are a developing country and our population is still increasing, our nation should invest in more waste management facilities. So you have to collect trash. You need enough trucks to collect waste and also process the waste. So systems and infrastructure just for waste management. So this could happen in the local community level or in the national level. We also could encourage recycling and manufacturing. So instead of producing more and more plastic, there should be movements from our commercial sector that they should just recycle what they manufacture. So for example, Coke, not hashtag not sponsored. For example, Coke, instead of producing more plastic just to make more or sell more Coke products, you could turn it around and recycle, collect your empty Coke bottles and recycle that. So that's one thing. So our society or our government could encourage or incentivize use of recycled products in manufacturing. We could also partner with the informal sector, which I do see here in Cabuyao, which we have a lot of waste picking and recycling. So it creates job opportunities for the informal sectors. We have seen in model countries that the informal sectors, although since they don't have jobs, they could be assigned to be waste pickers or recycling partners so that there are more manpower in terms of waste management. And then number 4, community campaigns. Because as the World Bank Group says, management of plastic waste must start in the household and individual levels. We as an individual could help a lot in terms of reducing our wastes. I mean, a person, like reducing the amount of waste you produce per day, if we do that as a collective, we can reduce the amount of plastic that we contribute to our environment. Then finally, there should be policy and planning. So the government should have policies in terms of plastics and how we, or like wastes in general, and how we dispose them. So there has been more aggressive, I think, aggressive movements towards sewage treatments in the past. So Boracay has rehabilitated, and we see the same thing happening in Manila Bay. So hopefully the sewage water and water treatment facilities has been updated. But aside from that, certain like countries should hold commercial sector like accountable, since our commercial sector produces a lot of plastics, a lot of wastes. The government should encourage minimization of the wastes. So we should hold, like, for example, there was a petition, like a petition for the Department of Trade in our country to ask our manufacturers to invest in packaging which are not plastic, just moving towards more sustainable and more environmentally friendly packaging. So, as a society, we must move away from the throwaway culture and move towards a sustainable circular economy, because how our economy is built is that you produce a product, then after you finish with the product, you throw it away. So that's a linear movement. So instead of doing that, we could have like a circular method. Like after you manufacture a product, a consumer uses it, and after being used, it returns to the manufacturer, and then you have a sustainable circular economy. And that will be very helpful for our environment. Okay, so that should tackle all our learning objectives. We have described how we generate wastes as in different terms, solid, liquid, and gas. Explain how different types of waste affect people, health as microplastics, and other reasons, and the environment as well. So, if you have any more questions, you could message me on Microsoft Teams or Messenger, or we could talk about it in our Uncomping synchronous session. That's all. Stay safe. Bye.